I came home early and caught my brother in bed with my fiancée. Then my parents demanded I pay for their wedding to keep the peace, so I cut them all off, moved 2,000 miles away, even changed my name. I need to get this out somewhere, anywhere, because if I sit in this silence any longer, I feel like the memories are going to claw their way out of my skull. It has been years of psychological warfare, betrayals layered upon betrayals, and a level of familial gaslighting so severe, it genuinely made me question my own sanity. I am writing this down to remind myself that I am not the crazy one. I am not the villain. 4 years ago, I was a 29-year-old lead structural engineer working in Seattle. I had spent the last decade of my life doing everything right. Long hours, steel-toed boots, breathing in concrete dust, and diesel fumes, working my way up from a junior site manager to overseeing massive commercial developments in the Westside commercial zone. I built a solid, enviable life. I had a beautiful modern apartment overlooking the skyline, a reliable truck, a heavy savings account, and a portfolio I was proud of. I thought I had the entire blueprint of my life mapped out perfectly. The centerpiece of that blueprint was Elena. We had been together for 3.5 years, engaged for the last 10 months. She was a pediatric nurse at the city's top hospital, radiant, fiercely intelligent, and driven. We actually met at my younger sister Chloe's nursing school graduation party. It was an instant, undeniable connection. I proposed to her on a freezing December evening by the waterfront, where we shared our first date. We both cried. My family was ecstatic. My mother immediately took over wedding planning, practically moving into our apartment with her binders and fabric swatches, while my dad was already making crude, boisterous toasts about future grandchildren at every Sunday dinner. Then there was my younger brother Mason. He was 27, a perpetually struggling musician who worked part-time as a barista in a trendy downtown cafe. He was the classic golden child who could do no wrong despite failing out of college twice and constantly needing financial bailouts from our parents. Mason always had this subtle, undermining way of talking about me. He would constantly joke that Elena was way out of my league or that she was settling for a boring corporate drone. It was always wrapped in that plausible deniability of brotherly banter, but the venom was there. I ignored it. I was too happy, too secure to see the massive, glaring red flags waving right in front of my face. It all shattered on a random, miserable Tuesday in November. We had just finished a massive foundation pour for a new high-rise beating the incoming storm front by mere hours. The site director was so thrilled we hit the milestone ahead of schedule that he sent the entire management team home at 1:30 p.m. I remember sitting in my truck, the rain hammering against the windshield. Feeling this overwhelming surge of affection for Elena, I figured I would surprise her. I stopped at her favorite artisan bakery, bought a box of ridiculous overpriced pastries, and planned to spend the entire afternoon curled up with her before her evening rotation started at the hospital. I pulled into my apartment complex's underground garage at exactly 2:15 p.m. I saw Elena's white sedan parked in its usual spot, completely normal. Tuesday was her administrative day off. I grabbed my bags, rode the elevator up to the 4th floor, and walked down the carpeted hallway. I didn't even bother trying to be quiet. I slid my key into the lock, turned it, and pushed the heavy wooden door open. The apartment was quiet, but not silent. There was music playing faintly from the master bedroom, some indie acoustic playlist Elena loved. I set my keys in the bakery box down on the kitchen island. I was shrugging off my damp jacket when I heard the sound. It wasn't the television. It wasn't a podcast. It was a low, rhythmic thudding against the drywall, accompanied by a sharp, breathless gasp. My stomach plummeted. A sickening, icy dread washed over my entire body. I told myself she was working out. She had to be working out. I walked down the short hallway, my boots silent on the hardwood floor. The bedroom door was cracked open about 2 inches. I pushed it wide open. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't drop to my knees or throw anything. The human brain is a bizarre mechanism. In moments of catastrophic trauma, it just shuts down the emotional receptors and begins recording raw data. My brother Mason was in my bed, my custom-built king-sized bed. He was tangled in the expensive linen sheets I had bought for Eleanor's birthday, and Eleanor was right there with him, her hands tangled in his hair, her eyes squeezed shut. I stood in the doorway for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 3 seconds. The floorboards creaked under my weight. Mason's head snapped up. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. Eleanor let out a piercing, hysterical shriek and scrambled backward against the headboard, frantically pulling the duvet up to her chin. Mason started stammering, his voice cracking like a terrified teenager. Carter, man. Wait, it's not what it looks like. We were just, get out, I said. My voice didn't even sound like my own. It was a dead, hollow monotone, completely devoid of inflection. It sounded like a machine. Mason was falling all over himself, hopping on one foot as he tried to pull his jeans on over his pale legs. Carter, listen to me, bro. Please, it just happened. It was a mistake. We were just talking, and you have exactly 5 minutes to get your clothes on and get out of my apartment, I said. My eyes locked dead on the wall behind them. If either of you are still inside this unit when the clock hits 2:25, I am calling the police and having you removed for trespassing. Eleanor finally found her voice. She was sobbing, thick, ugly tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. Carter, baby, please let me explain. I love you. It meant nothing. She reached a hand out toward me. I stepped back so fast, I nearly tripped over the doorframe, recoiling as if she were a venomous snake. Do not speak to me, I whispered. The coldness in my tone finally made her shut her mouth. Just get out. I turned my back on them, walked into the living room, and stood perfectly still by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the Seattle rain. I heard the frantic rustling of clothes, the desperate, hushed whispering, the sound of a zipper. 7 minutes later, I heard the front door click shut. I was alone. I didn't break down. I didn't smash the television or punch a hole in the drywall. I just walked over to the kitchen island, picked up the box of expensive pastries, and dropped them into the trash can. Then I sat on my leather couch and stared at the blank TV screen for 4 straight hours. I felt like someone had hollowed out my chest cavity with a melon baller. At 6:30 p.m., I picked up my phone. I had 42 missed calls from Eleanor and 17 from Mason. I ignored all of them. I opened my text messages and sent one single line to Elena. The engagement is permanently off. Do not ever contact me again. I will have your belongings boxed up and shipped to your parents' house. Then I blocked her number. I blocked her on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, everything. I took the $12,000 diamond engagement ring she had abandoned on the nightstand, in her panic, put it in a small velvet box, and shoved it to the back of my junk drawer. Next I called my parents. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice bright and cheerful. Carter, honey, we were just talking about you. Have you and Eleanor decided on the catering menu yet? I spoke with that same dead, mechanical voice. The wedding is cancelled. Eleanor and I are over. I came home from work early today and caught her in my bed with Mason. There was a horrifying, suffocating silence on the line. Then my mother gasped a sharp, ragged intake of breath and started sobbing hysterically. I heard her drop the phone, heard my dad yelling in the background, and then he picked up the receiver. Carter, what the hell is going on? Your mother is having a panic attack. I repeated the facts coldly, clinically. Mason was in my bed with my fiancée. I kicked them both out. The relationship is over. My dad's voice went dangerously hard. Are you absolutely sure, Carter? This is a massive accusation. I saw them with my own 2 eyes. Dad, they were naked in my bed. My God. My dad breathed heavily into the receiver. That is unforgivable. That boy has crossed the line for the last time. I am going to tear him apart. I am so sorry, son. We love you. We are going to handle this. I hung up. I felt a tiny, pathetic shred of validation. At least my parents had my back. At least they saw the reality of the situation. I called my sister Chloe next. She was working a double shift at the clinic. But when I told her, she immediately clocked out, drove straight to my apartment and brought 2 large pizzas and a 6-pack of dark stout. She didn't offer platitudes. She didn't tell me that time heals all wounds. She just sat on the couch with me in silence, drinking beer and letting me exist in my shattered reality. For the first 2 weeks, the illusion of family support held strong. My dad supposedly drove to Mason's apartment and screamed at him so loudly. The neighbors threatened to call the cops. My mom sent me daily paragraphs of affection telling me how much they loved me, how Mason was a disgrace, and how they would support whatever I needed. I genuinely believed I wasn't alone. I believed blood meant loyalty. Then came the first crack in the foundation. It was mid-December. I had taken a few days off work to try and reset my brain. I decided to stop by my parents' house in the suburbs to drop off a heavy-duty power washer I had borrowed from my dad months prior. I didn't call ahead. I just wanted to leave it in the garage and leave. I parked at the end of the driveway and hauled the machine up the concrete path. As I approached the side door of the garage, I heard my mother's voice drifting through the open kitchen window. She was on the phone. Her tone wasn't angry or disappointed. It was soft coddling and dripping with maternal sympathy. "I know, Mason, sweetheart. I know," she was cooing. "It's been so hard on you too. You've always struggled with your self-esteem, and Elena made you feel special. I'm not saying it was right, but Carter has always had everything come so easily to him. He's so wrapped up in his career, he'll bounce back. You're still my baby boy. We are going to work through this as a family. Just give it time." I froze. The handles of the power washer dug into my palms. I stood there paralyzed by the sheer, unadulterated betrayal radiating from that window. She was comforting him. She was comforting the man who had detonated my life, painting me as the emotionally distant workaholic who practically forced them together. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. This wasn't over. My family wasn't on my side. They were just waiting for the dust to settle so they could sweep my trauma under the rug and protect their golden child. I quietly set the power washer down on the driveway, turned around, and drove back to my apartment. I didn't confront her. There was absolutely no point. You cannot logic someone out of a delusion they choose to live in. 3 days later, the inevitable group text arrived. It was my mother inviting the whole family to our traditional Sunday dinner. I ignored it. 2 hours later, my phone rang. "Carter, honey, we really miss you," my mother said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Please come to dinner on Sunday. I'm making your favorite roast." "Is Mason going to be there?" I asked, my voice flat. There was a long, excruciating pause. "Carter, he's still your brother. We are still his parents. We cannot just cut him out of our lives and leave him on the streets. He's hurting too. You need to be the bigger person." "Watch me," I said, and hung up the phone. The next day, my dad showed up at my construction site. He bypassed security and walked straight into my mobile office trailer, shutting the door behind him. He put on his reasonable businessman voice, the exact tone he used when negotiating with stubborn contractors. "Son, we need to talk," he said, taking off his hard hat. What Mason did was despicable. Nobody is denying that. But he is family. He made a terrible mistake. A mistake is forgetting to use your turn signal, Dad. I interrupted, not looking up from my blueprints. "He didn't accidentally trip and fall inside my fiancée." My dad sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Don't be crude, Carter. Look, nobody is asking you to hug him and be best friends tomorrow. But you are tearing your mother apart. You have always been the mature one. You're successful. You're stable. Mason is a mess. He's always been a mess. If we abandon him now, he'll completely self-destruct. We need you to take the high road so this family can heal." I slowly set my pen down and looked him dead in the eyes. Why is it always my responsibility to absorb the damage? Why does he get to destroy my life and I have to be the one to fix the family dynamic? I am not taking the high road. "Dad, I am burning the bridge. Get out of my office." He left, shaking his head like I was a petulant child throwing a tantrum. I completely withdrew. I stopped attending family events. I worked 70-hour weeks burying myself in architectural schematics and concrete stress tests. I came home, ate frozen chicken and rice, went to the gym until my muscles failed, and slept. I was a ghost haunting my own life. Then came Thanksgiving. I had explicitly told my family I was not coming, but my sister Chloe called me the night before crying. She begged me to show up. She said she felt like she was losing her mind being the only sane person in that house, that she missed me desperately, and that if I just came for 1 hour to eat and leave, it would mean the world to her. Against every single one of my survival instincts, I caved. I arrived at my parents' house at 4 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day. The house smelled like roasted turkey and sage stuffing. The football game was blaring from the living room. For a split second it felt normal. I took off my boots in the foyer and walked into the dining room. Mason was sitting at the head of the table, and sitting right next to him, her hand resting intimately on his thigh, was Elena. The entire room went dead silent. Every single head turned to look at me. My mother was standing near the kitchen island holding a gravy boat, wearing this sickeningly hopeful, desperate smile, like she truly believed putting us all in the same room would magically force a reconciliation. Chloe looked horrified. She clearly had no idea Elena was going to be there. I didn't blink. I didn't say a single word. I simply turned on my heel, walked back to the foyer, picked up my boots and walked out the front door in my socks. Carter, please just sit down. Let's talk like adults, my dad bellowed from the porch as I walked down the driveway. I ignored him, threw my boots into the passenger seat of my truck and drove away. That was the turning point. I realized my family wasn't just passive in their betrayal. They were actively orchestrating my psychological torture to force their desired outcome. December arrived. I volunteered to work on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, overseeing an emergency structural repair on a commercial parking garage. I told my family I was out of town on a project. It was a lie, but it kept my phone quiet until Christmas night. At 7 p.m., Chloe texted me again. Carter, I know you're in the city. Please come over. Mom is having a full mental breakdown. Dad is screaming. I can't handle this alone. Please, just for 20 minutes. I swear on my life. Mason isn't here. His car isn't in the driveway. Please help me. I stared at the screen. Chloe had been the only one to sit with me in the dark. She was the only one who hadn't demanded I forgive them. I sighed, grabbed my keys, and drove through the snow to my parents' house. I pulled up. Chloe was right. Mason's beat-up Honda Civic was nowhere to be seen. I walked up the salted path and opened the front door. The house was decorated like a magazine cover. Garlands, twinkling lights, a massive 12-oot tree. I walked into the living room. My mother, my father, my aunt, my uncle, and Chloe were all gathered around the fireplace, and sitting on the love seat, holding hands and wearing matching ugly Christmas sweaters, were Mason and Elena. They had parked her car down the street to trick me into coming inside. My mother rushed forward, her eyes brimming with calculated tears. "Oh, Carter, sweetheart. Thank God you're here. This is what Christmas is all about. Family forgiveness and new beginnings." I looked at Chloe. She was weeping, shaking her head violently. "I didn't know, Carter. I swear to God I didn't know they were hiding in the basement." I looked at Mason, who was smirking slightly, entirely too comfortable. I looked at Elena, who had the audacity to give me a pathetic, apologetic pout. And then I looked at my parents. "You ambushed me," I said, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register again. "Son, enough of this childish grudge." My dad stepped forward, puffing his chest out. "Mason and Elena are in love. They are moving in together. We are a family, and we are not going to let your bruised ego destroy our holidays. You are going to sit down. You are going to shake your brother's hand, and we are going to move forward." "No," I said, stepping backward toward the door. "I'm leaving." My dad lunged forward and grabbed me by the shoulder, his grip incredibly tight, his face turning purple with rage. "You are not walking out that door, Carter. You will stop being so damn selfish. You are tearing your mother apart." My survival instincts, dormant for months, finally snapped. I didn't even think. I just reacted. I shoved his hand off my shoulder with extreme force. He stumbled, caught his balance, and shoved me back hard right in the center of my chest. Before my conscious brain could process the command, my right fist snapped upward. I hit my father squarely in the jaw. The sound was like a wooden bat hitting a wet sack of flour. My dad's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed backward into the coffee table, shattering the glass top into 1,000 pieces. Chaos erupted. My mother screamed at the top of her lungs. Chloe shrieked. Mason jumped up from the couch, his fists raised, yelling, "What the man?" I stood over my father, my knuckles throbbing, my breathing heavy. I looked at Mason, daring him to take a swing. He froze his cowardice, winning out. "Do not ever touch me again," I told my father, who was groaning and holding his bleeding face. I looked at my mother, who was sobbing hysterically on her knees. "You wanted to choose him. You got him. You are all dead to me." I walked out the door. got into my truck, and drove away. That night, sitting in my dark apartment, I made a clinical, ruthless decision. I could not survive in this city anymore. The poison was too deep. I opened my laptop, logged into my company's internal portal, and applied for an immediate indefinite transfer to our regional headquarters in Austin, Texas, 2,000 miles away. Because of my seniority and the massive demand for project managers in the booming Texas market, my transfer was approved in 48 hours. My apartment lease was month to month. I had no pets. I had no real ties left. By the second week of January, I had packed my entire life into a U-Haul. I changed my phone number. I deleted every single social media account I possessed. I didn't leave a forwarding address. I didn't say goodbye to anyone, not even Chloe. I vanished like a ghost in the night. Update 1. Austin was exactly what I needed. It was hot, loud, and entirely disconnected from my past. I threw myself into my new role as senior project manager for a massive downtown commercial development. I bought a small modern house in a quiet suburb, started running 5 miles every morning around Ladybird Lake, and slowly, agonizingly began to rebuild my shattered psyche. For 6 solid months, I heard absolutely nothing from the people who shared my DNA. It was pure, unadulterated peace. I was sleeping through the night again. The phantom weight on my chest had finally evaporated. Then in late June, I received a message on LinkedIn. It was from my older cousin Jenna. She lived in Dallas and had always been the black sheep of the extended family. Independent, rebellious, and fiercely critical of my parents' toxic dynamics. Carter, I know you're in Texas. I used a private investigator friend to track your professional license. Please don't block me. I am not a flying monkey for your parents. I haven't spoken to them in months. I am coming down to Austin for a tech conference next week. Can we please just grab a coffee? Just you and me? I promise on my life. I hesitated for 3 days, but the isolation of a new city was starting to wear on me, and Jenna had always been a straight shooter. I agreed, naming a highly public, crowded coffee shop downtown. I told her if I saw a single family member within a 5-meter radius, I was gone. I arrived 20 minutes early, scoped out the exits, and sat facing the door like a paranoid mob informant. Jenna walked in alone. She looked tired, but she smiled warmly when she saw me. We sat for 2 hours. She didn't ask me to forgive anyone. She didn't make excuses. She just told me she was proud of me for getting out, and we talked about our careers, the Texas heat, and normal mundane life. It felt incredibly healing. Before we left, Jenna hugged me tightly. My birthday is next month, she said. I'm renting out a private dining room at a steakhouse in downtown Austin. Just my closest friends and a few colleagues. No family. I would really love it if you came. You need to get out and socialize, Carter. I looked into her eyes. I didn't see any deception. No family, I asked. None. I swear to God. I agreed to go. A few weeks later, I met Sienna. I was at a local hardware store on a Sunday morning buying supplies to build a custom deck for my backyard. I was struggling to load 12-oot lumber onto a flatbed cart when a woman in denim overalls and a messy bun walked by, stopped and effortlessly grabbed the other end of the wood. You look like you're about to blow a gasket. She laughed, her green eyes sparkling. I've built skyscrapers, but this cart is defying the laws of physics, I joked back. Her name was Sienna. She was a physical therapist who specialized in sports rehabilitation. We stood in the lumber aisle talking for 45 minutes. She was witty, grounded, and possessed this incredibly calm, steady energy. I asked her for coffee. She said yes. We started dating. It was slow, deliberate, and entirely devoid of the chaotic, anxious energy that had defined my relationship with Elena. Sienna didn't play games. 3 weeks into dating, as we sat on my half-finished deck drinking beers, I told her everything. The cheating, the betrayal, the punch, the escape. I laid all my ugly, broken baggage out on the table and waited for her to run. Instead, she reached over, took my hand, and looked me dead in the eye. You survived a nightmare. You protected yourself. I think you're incredibly brave. I realized in that exact moment that I was going to marry her. 2 months later, Jenna's birthday dinner arrived. Sienna helped me pick out a nice button-down shirt. Have fun, she smiled, kissing my cheek. If it gets weird, fake a stomach bug and come home. I drove downtown, parked, and walked into the upscale steakhouse. The hostess led me to the private dining room in the back. I pushed open the heavy oak doors, a polite smile on my face, ready to meet Jenna's friends. The breath was violently knocked out of my lungs. Sitting around the massive mahogany table surrounded by birthday balloons were my mother, my father, Chloe Mason, and Elena. Jenna was standing at the head of the table, her face a mask of agonizing guilt. "I'm so sorry, Carter," Jenna whispered, tears instantly spilling down her cheeks. "Your dad paid off my massive credit card debt. I was drowning. They promised they just wanted to talk to you. I'm so sorry." The doors clicked shut behind me, locking automatically. My dad stood up wearing a perfectly tailored suit, looking like a mob boss holding court. My mother was already crying. Mason wouldn't look at me, staring intensely at his water glass. Eleanor was wearing a diamond necklace, the exact necklace my grandmother had left to my mother, to give to my future wife. "Sit down, son," my dad commanded, his voice echoing in the private room. "You've run far enough. It's time to end this ridiculous charade. You are coming back to the family." A cold, absolute rage settled over me. It wasn't the fiery, explosive anger of Christmas Eve. This was a glacial, terrifying calm. I was looking at a table full of strangers. "Open the doors," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Carter, please," my mother wailed, reaching her hands out across the table. "Mason and Elena are getting married. We need you to be his best man. We want the family whole for the wedding." I slowly turned my head and looked at my mother. I looked at the delusion deeply embedded in her eyes. "You want me to be the best man at the wedding of the brother who slept with my fiancée in my bed? You have to let it go." My dad slammed his fist on the table, rattling the silverware. "You have a great job down here. You're making incredible money. Mason is struggling. The wedding is expensive. And as the older, successful brother, it is your duty to help fund it. We've already tapped into the family trust for the deposit." The world seemed to stop spinning. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. "The family trust?" I asked quietly. "The trust fund you and Mom set up when we were kids, the one meant for our future children." My dad had the audacity to look slightly uncomfortable. "Mason needed a win. Carter, he's been very depressed. We used the funds to pay for the venue and Eleanor's dress, but we need you to cover the catering and the honeymoon. It's the least you can do after you assaulted me and abandoned your mother. They didn't just want me back, they wanted my wallet. They had drained the family savings to reward the golden child for stealing my life, and now they wanted me to foot the rest of the bill." I started laughing, a dark, hollow, genuinely amused laugh that made everyone at the table flinch. I looked at Jenna, who was sobbing into her hands. I looked at Mason, who looked pathetic and small, and I looked at my parents. "You are all completely, irredeemably insane," I said. I turned to the doors, unlocked them, and looked back over my shoulder one last time. "Have a beautiful wedding. I hope you choke on the cake." I walked out of the restaurant, ignoring my father screaming my name, drove straight to Sienna's house, and collapsed into her arms. Update 2. The harassment escalated to a psychotic level after that night. A month after the ambush, the letters started arriving at my corporate office. My parents had somehow tracked down my exact workplace. Envelopes marked urgent personal began flooding the reception desk. When I ignored them, the email started. They found my professional email address. I was getting 10 to 15 emails a day from burner accounts ranging from my mother begging for my soul, to my dad threatening to sue me for the medical bills from his broken jaw, to Mason drunkenly demanding I send him a check. It culminated when a massive, gaudy wedding invitation was delivered via certified mail to my company's HR department, alongside a letter from my mother, falsely claiming I was suffering from a severe mental breakdown and begging my employer to intervene. I was called into the HR director's office. I was humiliated. I had to sit in a glass room and explain to a corporate executive that my family was stalking me. Thankfully, my company took it incredibly seriously. The corporate legal team immediately drafted a severe cease and desist order and sent it to my parents, threatening them with massive civil litigation for workplace harassment and defamation. I didn't stop there. With Sienna holding my hand, I went to the Travis County Courthouse and filed for a permanent restraining order against my mother, my father, and Mason. I submitted hundreds of pages of emails, texts, the HR reports, and police logs. The judge granted it without hesitation. The silence that followed was absolute. The legal barrier finally did what my words could not. 2 years passed. Beautiful, healing, extraordinary years. Sienna and I got married in a tiny private ceremony in the Texas Hill Country. No extended family, just her parents, a few friends, and a rescue golden retriever named Rusty, who served as our ring bearer. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Sienna came out of the bathroom, holding a plastic stick with 2 solid pink lines. We were going to have a baby. I fell to my knees and cried into her stomach. This was my real family. This was the legacy I was going to protect with my life. At 7 months pregnant, we were sitting in the nursery painting the walls a soft sage green when I brought it up. "I don't want him to have my last name," I said quietly, rolling paint onto the drywall. Sienna stopped wiping a smudge of paint from her cheek. "Are you sure, Carter?" "That's a huge step. My last name is tied to people who view me as a disposable bank account," I said, my voice firm. "I don't want my son carrying the legacy of a man who demanded I pay for my abuser's wedding. I want to take your last name. I want to be a Vance." Sienna started crying. The next week we went to the courthouse. I stood before a judge, swore my oaths, and legally eradicated my connection to my bloodline. I walked out of that building as Carter Vance. Our son, Julian Vance, was born during a massive Texas thunderstorm. When the nurse placed his tiny, screaming body into my arms, I looked down at his perfect face and felt a tectonic shift in my soul. Every ounce of lingering pain, every shadow of betrayal, was completely obliterated by the overwhelming, ferocious love I felt for this tiny human. He would never know their toxicity. He would never know their conditional love. I thought the story was over. I thought the universe had finally balanced the scales. I was wrong. The climax was still coming. When Julian was 6 months old, I was working on site at a new hospital expansion project. I was walking across the steel framing wearing my hard hat and high-vis vest when my radio crackled. It was the front gate security guard. "Mr. Vance, we have an older gentleman at the perimeter fence. He's demanding to see you. Says his name is your father, but he doesn't know your new last name. He's causing a scene." My blood ran cold. The restraining order was still active, but they had clearly hired another private investigator. I told security to hold him there. I walked down the scaffolding, my heart pounding, ready to call the police and have him arrested. I reached the chain-link fence. My father was standing on the other side. I almost didn't recognize him. He looked like he had aged 20 years. His expensive suits were gone. He was wearing a rumpled, stained polo shirt. He had lost at least 40 pounds. His skin was sallow and his hands were shaking violently. He looked utterly destroyed. I stood 10 feet back from the fence, crossing my arms. "You are violating a court order. I have security dialing 911 right now. You have exactly 30 seconds to speak before you go to jail." My father gripped the chain-link fence, tears instantly streaming down his hollowed cheeks. "Carter, please, please, son. I am begging you. I have nothing left." I stared at him, feeling absolutely zero empathy. "What happened to the Golden family, Dad?" He choked on a sob, his chest heaving, and then the absolute mind-bending truth spilled out. "It's gone. Everything is gone." He wept, his voice cracking. Mason and Eleanor, they destroyed us. Tell me I demanded a dark, vindictive curiosity taking over. We paid for the wedding. We drained the trust fund, but Mason wanted to open a high-end cocktail bar downtown. He begged us. Eleanor said it was his dream. Your mother and I, we took out a second mortgage on the house. We co-signed a $150,000 small business loan for them. We gave them everything. He paused, gasping for air, looking at me with desperate, pleading eyes. Elena wasn't just cheating on you, Carter. She was cheating on Mason too, the entire time. She had been sleeping with a chief surgeon at her hospital since before she ever got into your bed. She only slept with Mason to sabotage her engagement to you because you were too observant and she wanted an easy way out. After the wedding, after the loan money cleared into their joint account, she transferred every single penny into an offshore account, filed for divorce, and fled the state with the doctor. I stood perfectly still. The sheer astronomical scale of the karma was almost hard to process. Mason is facing federal wire fraud charges because his name was on the LLC. My dad continued sobbing openly, now ignoring the construction workers staring at us. His wife left him. He's drinking himself to death. Your mother had a complete nervous breakdown and is in a psychiatric facility. The bank foreclosed on our house last week. I am living in a weekly motel. Carter, please. You are the senior VP now. I saw your promotion on a trade website. You have money. You have a huge house. Please, son. We need a loan. Just to keep Mason out of prison, just to get Mom out of the facility. You're our only hope. I stared at the man who had raised me. The man who had demanded I swallow my trauma to protect the brother who betrayed me. The man who had ambushed me, assaulted me, and tried to bleed me dry. He didn't come here to apologize. He came here to use me as an ATM. I felt a smile slowly spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had just watched a chess opponent accidentally set their own king on fire. Dad, I said, my voice echoing with absolute terrifying authority. My name is Carter Vance. I do not have a brother. I do not have a mother. And I certainly do not have a father. Carter, please, you can't let your family die in the gutter, he screamed, rattling the fence. You chose your family, I said softly, turning my back to him. And now you get to die with them. I walked away as the police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they approached the construction site. I didn't look back as they placed my father in handcuffs for violating the restraining order. I didn't look back as they put him in the back of the cruiser. I went back to my office, finished my shift, and drove home to my beautiful wife and my perfect son. That was 2 years ago. I heard through the grapevine a mutual friend from Seattle that Mason took a plea deal and is currently serving 3 years in a minimum security facility for financial fraud. My parents officially divorced. My mother is living in subsidized housing, and my father is working as a greeter at a big box hardware store to pay off his crushing debt. Elena completely vanished, likely living a life of luxury with her stolen money and her surgeon boyfriend. Sometimes when I am sitting on my back porch in Texas, watching Julian chase our dog through the sprinklers while Sienna laughs and drinks iced tea, I think about the alternate universe where I forgave them, where I stayed, where I let them drain my soul and my bank account to keep the peace. And then I smile, take a sip of my beer, and thank God for the day I walked out that.